Let's go with that. I'll 46. Just to give a quick explanation about the instruments of the Boeing 737-200. You'll notice the flight instruments are fairly standard as you would see in most aircraft. We have our airspeed indicator, attitude indicator, a primary altimeter, a radar altimeter. We have a RMI with a built-in compass as well, and then we have the HSI, our vertical speed indicator with a TCAS display built into it. There's our backup altimeter, and we have our clock down in the bottom corner. As well, we also have a backup attitude indicator as well. Right below that, we have our panel with our fuel gauges. So we have both of our main tank fuel gauges. These will be the fuel tanks located in the wings. And there's our center fuel tank gauge. Moving on over to the center stack of engine instrument panel, we have the top starts with our EPR gauges for the exhaust pressure ratio. This is the one instrument that you don't see on most modern jets, but they use it in the older ones. Right below it, we have N1 gauges, or first stage compressor inlet speed indication. Right below it is the EGT gauge for the exhaust gas temperature. Next is N2, or second stage compressor speed. And the bottom gauge is our fuel flow indicators. Next column on the right, we start with our oil pressure indicators, oil temperature, oil quantity, and these are the vibration indicators for the engines. Next is the flap indicator. So obviously in cruise we have the flaps up showing 0. Right below that we have our anti-skid switches, the auto brake switch, and that's the full coverage of what we have for the Boeing 737-200. All right, so continuing on to the panel below the engine instruments, we have our navigation screens. So this is one of the upgrades to the 737-200, specifically at Canadian North as well. They've gone ahead for all our 200 aircraft, added universal FMSs. So that's one here and one there. And as well, we have a multifunction display in the center. So right now we're traveling between Iqaluit and Rankin Inlet. We're actually operating in true heading right now instead of magnetic heading due to the compass unreliability for the magnetic compass at this latitude. So the display looks like we're a little bit, it's showing our magenta line, which is our navigation line towards Rankin Inlet. It looks like it's off to the right fairly significantly, but that's part of the displaying in true. Right now you can see our destination, Rankin Inlet, is right there, are presently right here. The wind vector is not correct because in true it doesn't show up correctly. Presently we'd be navigating from a waypoint named Casset to Romeo Tango, which is the Rankin Inlet NDB. And in our older aircraft, before they were upgraded, we had a different FMS system, so we didn't have the nice map display which would show exactly where you were at all times. This is a definite advantage to us to be able to precisely know where we are. As well, this can be overlaid with weather. So if there's thunderstorms to avoid, it'll show up right on our track line. And as well, it will show traffic when there's other aircraft in the area. Okay, continuing on through the controls here, we have our speed brake, which is obviously stowed in flight unless we need to slow down rather quickly for some reason. There are thrust levers. The reverse thrust levers are on the opposite side here. The aircraft does say it has go-around switches. These are not actually wired up for this aircraft. Our flat lever selector. We have trim wheels on both sides with a trim indicator on both sides. The parking brake is located right there. These are the actual start levers, controls the fuel flow to the engine. Our stabilizer trim cutout switches, so this is the normal operation of the stabilizer trim. It's affected with the electric switches on the control wheel, as well as the autopilot will control it as well. If we were to move those to the cutout position, you can then take a handle out and manually move the trim. Continuing on down, you have your fire warning switches for the engines. Our radios, VHF1, VHF2, as well as NAV1 and NAV2. This is the PDCS, which is a performance computer that Boeing designed quite a while ago. It provides a lot of information for us. So currently it's showing us what flight levels are optimum and maximum for the aircraft based on the weight and the outside temperature. It'll also calculate what weight you're at, so you can figure out quickly which landing weight you'll be at when you're doing your landing calculations. Continuing below that, we have our radio selectors. So we can choose between listening to radio 1 or radio 2, or the third radio, which in our case is actually a satellite radio, which is another upgrade from Canadian North. And you can also select to listen to the cabin interphone if you need to speak to the flight attendants in the rear of the aircraft, or if you need to speak on the PA, there's a switch for that as well. And finally, we also have our rudder trim and our aileron trim at the back. Okay, we're just about to start our descent for Rankin Inlet. We're doing the RNAV runway 31 approach into Rankin Inlet. We're going to proceed direct to fix tie jet, and then we're going to follow a 309-degree true track inbound to the runway. As you can see, we cross over the water coming in, and we'll notice the town on the right-hand side as we come in. Today there's quite strong winds straight down the runway of 30 gusting 40 knots, and those winds continue all the way up through altitude, so therefore we're delaying our descent a little bit to account for that headwind. That's one of the things as 737-200 pilots we have to do, is we have to calculate our descent distances in our heads, accounting for wind, weight, and routing variables for our descent.